Hello everyone, my name is Rajat and I am here to talk about a case study that I did on Forestry service request. The dataset that I used was from New York City Parks and Recreations. The fundamental idea of the research was to break down which parts of New York City had more number of forestry related service requests. The data collection was done to record the service request in the accompanying regions that could be utilized to decipher any useful insights from the dataset. The work orders are utilized to record the exercises performed by park staff, temporary workers, and different agencies on account of their outwork. The data request was raised by 311 administrators during years 2015 to 2020. The dataset is a combination of various factors like complaint type, street name, park name, service request, as well as it has the general demographic data inside. Moving on to the next slide, the various insights that we got by analyzing the dataset are presented now. The first insight would be that we could see across years 2015 to 2020, 20,000 new trees were planted in year 2017. Well, tracking the service request and their time frame will let us know the efficiency of New York City Parks and Recreation Department, and this will also help us to determine if more trees are needed, looking at the data spread across few years, and this would in turn help us to plan a proper budget for the same. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide talks about the damage done to the New York City infrastructure by trees. Well, the data set helped us to determine it helped us to actually determine whether the trees were causing damage to the New York City infrastructure or not, and we could see that the following facts, that is, the Queens and Brooklyn stand out to be the most affected. Manhattan, on the other hand, is the least affected. Damage to urban infrastructure has increased in Queens and Brooklyn compared to Manhattan over the last 5 years. Since there is cost associated with every service request, and damage to the city infrastructure is also an added cost. Trees are usually planted to give shade, make the environment beautiful. However, they have acted as an hazard and can cause considerable damage to the city as well as to people. Let's on the next slide. The next slide talks about damaged trees, overgrown trees, and even the dead trees. And it helped us to determine that Queens has the highest number of trees, followed by Brooklyn. The following facts were also uncovered by the dataset. The Queen had over 50,000 service requests for damaged trees, 4,000 service requests for dead trees, and almost 29,000 service requests for overgrown trees. Brooklyn is next with over 42,000 service requests for damaged trees and almost 24,000 service requests for overgrown trees or branches. Manhattan, on the other hand, had less number of service requests. The data for 5 years displays a lot of service requests that were raised to maintain or address the issue of dead, damaged, and overgrown trees. These results help us to root out the areas that are most vulnerable, and proper planning can help us to lower the service requests that are being raised. The costs associated with each service request matters a lot. Let's move on to the next slide. The next slide talks about the unlawful damage that has occurred in Brooklyn over the last 5 years. And here we could easily see the dataset describes various things that are, the description says that one of the factors is bicycle is being chained to the tree, branches are being damaged, roots are damaged. There is a lot of unauthorized tree pruning, unauthorized tree removal being done. And since we know that the maintenance of trees does have a cost associated with them, and if there is a repeated damage being done to them, then the overall cost of a service request can increase over some time, And few facts which we uncovered was the areas of Bronx and Staten Island have the least illegal tree damage. Brooklyn has suffered increased illegal tree damage over the last 5 years. The most important contributor to illegal tree damage is unauthorized removal of trees. Unauthorized tree pruning is also a cause of damage to the trees. Bicycles are being chained to the trees, and it is a deliberate cause of damage that is being done to the trees. The next slide talks about Queens, and the Queens has the highest number of 311 service requests that have been raised. And the service requests that have been raised help us to it basically covers any concern that the people have regarding anything regarding the trees. And here we determine that Queens has the highest number of requests, followed by Brooklyn, Staten Island, Bronx, and lastly Manhattan. Analyzing this data set gives some interesting results. Brooklyn has an average of 20,000 requests each year. The Bronx and Manhattan have an average of 4,000 to 5,000 service requests. These results display a huge gap of 311 service requests between different areas of New York City. These results will help New York City Parks and Recreation to plan a meticulous budget and also provide a heads up on the future cost and calls associated. And now we come to the conclusion of our project or the case study. And while analyzing the data set given by the New York City Parks and Recreation, we could develop a few insights regarding New York City trees, which are as follows. Queens and Brooklyn have a high density of tree concentration, and this helps us to explain that a lot of service requests are coming from these areas. Manhattan, on the other hand, is a concrete jungle and has less number of trees. This explains low service requests over a period of time, and this also means that it has younger trees. The cost associated with servicing trees would be less. Queens and Brooklyn, on the other hand, have more hazard requests than any other parts of the city. This can help us to conclude that the trees are older and need regular maintenance, and they indicate a higher cost to the city. Well, there is need of frequent tracking of overgrown trees or branches. It will help us to minimize cost to the property and city infrastructure. And we could easily say that Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island stand at the forefront of expenditure. And there is a lot of frequent damage being caused by bicycles being chained to the trees. Maybe providing a bicycle stand in the city center or near city trails will help minimize the damage to trees. And unauthorized tree damage is also being seen as an added cost to the city. The city does need to keep an eye on the areas with most tree removals. This might help us to find the offenders and help us to, maybe we could find them and increase the revenue for the department. Well, we could also plan few things for the future, like this analysis could help the NYC Parks and Recreation Department to restructure how they process each service request more efficiently at a minimum cost. The decrease in the cost of servicing each service request can help the Parks Department of New York City to focus their resources on more concerning areas. The areas with low number of trees can be identified, and a plantation drive could be organized to increase the green cover. And lastly, I would say we could take help of the support groups and forums to create awareness on social media platforms such as Instagram and Facebook, so that more and more people are being aware of the benefit of trees. And if we can arrange some donations or raise some awareness to the general public, that could help us to make the New York City more beautiful by increasing the green cover. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. If you have any concerns, questions and answers, please feel free to mail me. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.